Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The Georgia Bulldogs continuing to build the trenches in the 2024 class. This time on the defensive side of the ball, landing four-star defensive lineman Joseph Jonah-Ajonye, one of the top defensive linemen in the 2024 class. Going to talk a little bit about what he's going to bring to this defense, and then just take a look at what this 2024 class is starting to look like for Georgia, and then kind of update you guys on some of the prospects that Georgia is trending for in the next couple of days. Now, before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys, and especially the Georgia fans. You guys have been absolutely awesome on the recruiting trail. Been a blast talking football with you guys in the comment section. You guys have shown a ton of support to the fellas. So if you do enjoy the content and you enjoy the updates, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, can't thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown. Talking Daniel Calhoun, talking Michael Uini. And I have a feeling we're going to be talking a lot more prospects in the next couple of days. So, again, if you do enjoy the updates, lock in because we'll be back updating you guys on this Georgia class in 2024. Let's get into Joseph Jonah-Ajonye. And the one thing I want to talk about with him before we get into the film is just the versatility and the sheer athleticism that you're getting. And that's probably what brought him to Georgia, right? Oklahoma was kind of in the lead. And when it gets to, okay, you're a freak athlete. You got every skill you got every tool in the toolkit to be kind of an all-American defensive lineman. What team's been developing the best defensive lineman in the last couple of years? It's the Georgia Bulldogs. And I think that's why he's going to Georgia. And another thing to note, kind of similar to what we talked about on the offensive line, is these guys are not afraid of competition. They're not afraid of getting to Athens and maybe not playing for the first 2 years. And then when it comes to playing meaningful snaps in third and fourth years, like they are ready. They are one of the best. I mean, you going up against some of the best offensive linemen in the country at practice. So you're starting to see these guys kind of buy into the development of what Athens, Georgia brings to the table. And this is a guy that if you can get developed, I mean, he is going to be a freak. Another thing I like about him, and again, we'll get into the film in a second, 6'4", 275, can play kind of all along the defensive line. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets up to around 300 pounds and plays on the inside. But he's also a guy that you watch the film. He's playing on the edge. The bend and burst off the line of scrimmage is next level for a kid. I mean, he looks like Nolan Smith. Maybe not quite bendy and bursty as Nolan Smith, but up there. But he's also 275 pounds. Nolan Smith was 230 pounds playing at Georgia. And so there's a lot to like about what Joseph Jonah-Ajonye brings to the table. But I think I like the most is just the versatility. Like the ability for this guy to play all along the line of scrimmage, get into the backfield, be really, really strong at the point of attack. And this is kind of what the Georgia, but you look at why Georgia's been winning these national championships is because they're dominant on both sides of the line of scrimmage, that offensive line that we talked about a lot. And then obviously that defensive line, which gets a little bit more credit. Now this offensive line also elite for Georgia. Firing up the film on him. You're going to see motor too, which is nice. That's, again, Nolan Smith. I'm not trying to comp him to Nolan Smith, but that was what Nolan Smith excelled at. Like, Nolan Smith did not stop moving when he was on the field for Georgia. And you can go back to his days at high school. That's what you saw. Joseph Jonah-Ajonye is a very similar guy. He gets into the backfield. His get-off for someone who's 275 pounds playing on the inside, it just represents such a problem for interior offensive linemen. I mean, when you have someone, Jalen Carter kind of offered this too, just kind of next level movement skills and explosiveness on the inside. These guards and centers just can't really deal with it. Joseph Jonah-Ajonye kind of brings that element to the table. Like, again, really, really strong, does not stop moving, consistently going after the football. No doubt that's something that Kirby Smart really coveted with Joseph Jonah-Ajonye on the film. Like, this dude is a guy that's relentless. Trey Scott's been phenomenal, not only recruiting these guys, but developing these guys. Lot to like about what he brings to the table. Tool set, unbelievable. Get off, unbelievable. Penetration, unbelievable. Georgia gets another good one, and this is kind of their premier get on the defensive line for the Georgia Bulldogs. Taking a look at this class in 2024, you obviously have Dylan Raiola. You got 23 commitments, and it seems like Georgia's going to take like 30 kids in this class. The amount of kids they're trending for that we'll get into in a second, I mean, I could see this class being maybe 30 takes in 2024, and it's highlighted by some elite top talent, right? Dylan Raiola transferring to play at Buford, Alice Robinson. I want to talk about the defensive line and what they're doing because they got a couple guys that I really like. Jordan Thomas coming over from Don Bosco Prep in New Jersey. He's a guy that's probably going to play on the interior, but another one of those players kind of similar to Jonah-Ajonye, who really big, but the athleticism for that frame is kind of next level. Justin Green, another guy that kind of the heavy-handed or edge guy. And then you take a look at some of the diamonds in the rough that Kirby Smart's been known to get, right? I want to talk about Nnamdi Okwuegbunam from North Carolina. I'm just gonna say this, and I don't mean to sound like I'm telling you guys this guy's like Nolan Smith and this guy's like Jalen. I'm not trying to say that. Those guys were generational talents. The last time Georgia went to the state of North Carolina and grabbed a 3-star big body defensive lineman, it was Jordan Davis. And it worked out pretty damn well for the Georgia Bulldogs. And yeah, at some point, like Kirby's going to grab it. Kirby, Trey Scott, this defensive staff, they're going to grab those top-tier guys. But what they've also done a really nice job of is kind of the evaluation of some of those guys that maybe aren't getting picked up by 24/7 Sports or On3 in the recruiting trail and the recruiting services and the recruiting rankings, and kind of finding those diamonds in the rough. And I wonder if they found one here in the state of North Carolina, because you're taking a look at this defensive line. It's deep and it's talented. And that's the two things that we've talked about most, specifically on the defensive line. Georgia has been so successful on the defensive line. Yes, because they've had guys like Trayvon Walker, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt. No, I mean, I probably left out a few guys. That's telling you how good they've been. They've had elite caliber guys, but they've also been extremely deep. Like when they have to run out a guy like Nazir Stackhouse, like they Zion Logue, they have been like those guys would start on almost every other Power 5 team. And so having the ability to be like, all right, Jalen Carter, you need a breather. We're going to have to cycle you in, and have a guy that would be starting on the Florida Gators, that's special. I think that's another reason why this Georgia defensive line has continued to stay dominant, because they rotate their guys. They keep all their guys fresh. And when it comes time to rotate guys, they have other guys who can come in, and the level of play really doesn't drop off. Where you look at other teams, and not to just like hammer at Florida, but that's something we've talked about a lot with the Florida Gators. Like they had a decent one deep on the defensive line. Ron Dexter was a pretty solid football player. And I think why you saw the film not so good for him is because he was playing like 700 snaps last year. Why? Because they didn't have any depth behind him. The Georgia Bulldogs have that top caliber talent, but they also have phenomenal depth, and that comes from recruiting guys and winning these recruiting battles and bringing in guys like a Joseph Jonah-Ajonye, who might not start until he's a sophomore or junior, but he's going to be a guy that you can trot out there and feel really comfortable about what he's going to be able to do and a rotation on that defensive line. Now, here's the fun part. This is always the most fun part about doing these updates, is talking about what this class could look like, specifically on the defensive line. You land Joseph Jonah-Ajonye, massive get. You take a look down. I mean, we've talked about this. Georgia right now is swinging the biggest stick on the recruiting trail. Like when Kirby Smart, Trey Scott, especially if you're a defensive lineman, call your phone and you're an elite defensive lineman, you're picking up and you're taking a visit to Athens. Aiden Breland's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised at all if Georgia ends up winning that recruiting battle, right? I know Oregon's in it. I know USC's in it. I know Miami's in it. But Georgia having all that success in terms of developing guys, like that keeps them in it for every single player across the country, especially when it gets to the defensive line. LJ McCray, another guy that, again, seems like the Florida Gators, Florida State kind of have the inside track on him. He's from Florida. Hard to say that Georgia, if they don't want to turn up the heat on him, can't land a guy like him. I know Christopher Jones trending to the Georgia Bulldogs, but going down the list, I mean, it's just the amount of talent that they've had on campus. Jordan Ross, Edric Houston. Edric Houston's an interesting one from Buford. I'd really like if Georgia could win that one out. As a Michigan fan, I mean, I know he's trending to Ohio State. You got Dylan Raiola now playing his high school ball at Buford. KJ Bolden might be committing to Georgia at the beginning of August. You got two of his Buford teammates locked into Georgia. Maybe you can make some traction with Edric Houston going to Georgia. Jordan Ross, again, if there is a guy that I think could be kind of that Nolan Smith type, it is Jordan Ross. But again, you look down the list, like the amount of talent that's been on campus that's considering the Georgia Bulldogs, especially on the defensive line. The last guy I want to talk about, Williams Emaneri. Dylan Stewart sounds like maybe trending to Ohio State, but Williams Emaneri, like, was trending to Oklahoma, just like Joseph Jonah-Ajonye was trending to Oklahoma. But again, when Georgia turns up the heat on you and you're an elite defensive lineman coming out of high school, it's really hard to say no to a guy like Kirby Smart. And what the Georgia, it's hard to not just the person that Kirby Smart is, who is a phenomenal football coach. It's hard to say no to winning national titles, getting developed into first-round talent. That's checks off all the boxes, and we've said this. Like in the modern recruiting world of the NIL, yes, that is a factor in it. A lot of these top programs have they all offer NIL. They all have the nicest facilities. What are these guys? What are the two boxes that are hard to check that not everyone can check because it requires you to actually do it? Is win a national title and put guys in the NFL. The Georgia Bulldogs checking those two boxes, which are arguably the two most important boxes you need to check on the recruiting trail, they're doing that better than anyone. Hence, you're starting to see them recruit better than anybody. Williams Amunari is a guy that I could certainly see the Georgia Bulldogs end up landing. And then on the offensive side of the ball, we haven't talked much offensive playmakers. Like, just wait till Dylan Raiola gets to sink his teeth into this a little bit. I mean, a guy like Mike Matthews, a guy like Ryan Wingo, it suddenly becomes a lot easier to get the offensive skill when you have the number one quarterback in your 2024 class. So I think that will come. Not that they already have guys like Nitron Tuggle who you feel good about, but I feel like they could land another 5-star wide receiver as well. Again, Georgia carrying the biggest stick when it comes to the recruiting trail, attracting a lot of elite caliber talent, not just to be interested in Georgia, but to take visits, to put them in the top 5. You look at every top 50 national dude, Georgia Bulldogs are in that list because what Georgia has done the last couple of years in terms of developing talent, winning national titles. It's not slowing down for the Georgia Bulldogs anytime soon. So appreciate you guys checking the boys out again. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The Georgia fans, you guys have been awesome. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys, and we'll talk to y'all later.